and I welcome you to the meeting of the Finance and Assurance Finance and Assurance Committee meeting, sort of starting at 9 o'clock. Apologies to any members of the public if they're zooming in. We've just tried to get a bit of IT going right here as we essentially hold a Zoom meeting. The agenda is in front of us. I have had just a couple of notes, as I've indicated to the members. At 10:30 we will adjourn this meeting so that councillors, full council can pick up its open workshop on the Three Waters submission to Minister Mahuta, and that will take the time it takes, and when that's finished we will reconvene the Finance and Assurance meeting. And I understand that particularly we will also be making certain that we take item 7.3 on your agendas, which is the interim performance report at 9:30. We've got, I think, a few staff lined up to join the Zoom for questions that we may have on that paper. So with the time now at 10 past, we've got 20 minutes to get through the other stuff prior to then. So with a bit of luck, we will be there. As again noted at the start, primarily I will put the motions. I'll look for either Paul or Don, who are with me in the room, to second. If that's not the case and they're not prepared to, I'll obviously look further afield. And we've also agreed that from a voting perspective, if you could use the reaction tab at the bottom of your screen. Sorry, if you want to raise questions, if you could use the reaction tab at the bottom of your screen and raise the yellow hand. And when it comes to voting, we will do that by physically raising our hands and either saying yes or no at the appropriate stage. Assume you've all got appropriate health and safety emergency responses in your own individual houses. I think folk here in the chamber know where we are going if there is an emergency. Right, if I could, with that, then ask us just to firstly move to apologies. I don't believe I've received any apologies. Pardon? Everybody's here. It looks like it, doesn't it? That's great. Leave of absences, I've got no requests for those. Conflicts of interest. Is there any matter of interests that people need to declare at this point? There is one matter coming up in public excluded, and I would like to suggest that at that point we just check on that, because it's a matter that there could be other interests, and it would be worthwhile just checking at that stage. But otherwise, is there any matters of interest people would like to raise?
Well, it's one I mentioned to you earlier.
Yep.
Indirect. As a shareholder in Frontier, there could be a link made between that and the backers.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we'll deal with that in public excluded, Paul. But thank you for that. Okay. There being none, we haven't been informed of anybody seeking public forum. There's no extraordinary urgent items other than what I've noted, which is that we will adjourn this meeting at 10:30. Can we move then to item 6, which is confirmation of the minutes, which is, I think, is on a page in your agenda. It is on. Sorry, page 14. Thank you. Page 14 of 215. I'll move from the chair that we accept these true record. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul. Is there any discussion or matters of correction on the minutes that people need to raise with me? There being none, I'll put the motion then, please. As I say, if you could raise your hand and yell out a yes or a no, that would be grateful. All those in favour, pardon? Seconder was Paul. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Only Julie?
Aye.
Thanks, Sable. I'm trying to get a quorum here. Those against?
Yes.
Thank you, John. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. There was one item that I just noted that would be appropriate for follow-up, but it does come up later in our papers, which is paragraph 7.4D on page 18, which is the audit arrangements and more the dates. I'll suggest that we come back to that, I think, later in the minutes. Because obviously we're meant to be doing stuff today, or in fact by today, which isn't possible according to these minutes. So we will come back to that in due course. Thank you for that. If we could move then to item 7.1, which is the work plan. Anne, you've disappeared. You've gone to a different room.
Yeah,
Well
I
done.
have.
Very smart.
So yes, I'd just like to present the work plan for the year ended 30th of June 2022 and just where the committee is at with this. Of course, we all know that due to the change in the audit audit timeline, we've had to move some of the reports that would normally have come to this meeting further out. In addition to that, there's several other changes to the meeting plan. There's a couple of audits there that will now be shifted to the 22nd of October meeting just because we haven't received the final report yet. And also the 2021 audit engagement letter has also been added to this report. But otherwise, I will just take that report as read and ask for any questions.
Right, are there any questions folk would like to raise about the work plan? There being none, it seemed reasonably straightforward to me, and I think reflects exactly where we are at. I think the critical thing. Oh no, I think that's all where it stands. I'll put the motion then that I better check what the motion actually says, so it's the right thing, that we receive the report and we note the changes that have been made. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Don. So moved, Bruce, seconded, Don. All those in favour, please raise their hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? It's carried. Brilliant. Fiona, you're not quite on your game. You didn't make me realise that I'd actually was passing the motion for minutes of 2 meetings under item 6. Can I just check with members that you be aware that unless everybody's too worried, we actually have passed that motion on the minutes for 2 meetings, not just 1. We had the last normal meeting, which was on the 15th of June, but we also had an extraordinary meeting. You recall we had a very short meeting over the long-term plan. So unless anybody objects, and you object, Fiona, we have actually adopted 2 sets of minutes in one go. Brilliant. That's good. Item 7.2 is our risk management report. How are we going for time? Because we are probably. I wonder, Jane, if we could perhaps have this introduction, but we'll have to make a break for 9:20 for when staff are more generally present for the following item. But if you can introduce it, please, then we can start the discussion, which would be great. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, councillors. So the purpose of my report is to submit the September 21 quarterly update and risk register for your consideration. Before I go into the updates, there is one correction to the report. Given the gap between this meeting and the next council meeting, the report proposes taking those risks of issue on up to community and strategy next week. However, since the agenda ran, it has been decided that they will continue the ordinary process and will be presented to council when it meets on the 27th of October. So another point to note is that the risk leads you'll see on the dashboard, the risk leads have been removed for each risk. This is just a temporary measure and allows us to make some adjustments to how those responsibilities are allocated given the reconfiguration of the leadership team. So instead, this quarter, after input from the action officers, those priority risks have been reviewed by the leadership team as a whole, and any areas of issues have been outlined in the report. So on to the updates. The latest COVID outbreak has shaped some of the reporting over the last quarter. The organisation handled the transition into lockdown and back out again smoothly with systems and processes working well. Recognising and acknowledging that staff are working differently is hoped to go some way to mitigating any increased levels of staff stress and lockdown fatigue. Where we are seeing the biggest impact of COVID has been in the delivery of our work program, and you'll see in the report that the resource and delivery risk area has changed in status from improving last quarter to worsening. You'll remember that this risk was assessed as improving in June with the full works program being signed off through the LTP. However, it's highlighted now due to the pressure that's being, the ongoing lockdowns are placing on it with material availability, transport logistics and travel restrictions all playing a part. So in order to mitigate against the consequences of this, the works program has been structured with longer lead-in times to try and work around issues with material supply. And there's also been a focus over the quarter on procurement optimisation, with contracted workshops being held and feedback sought, so that we can ensure that our work program remains attractive in what's fast becoming an increasingly oversaturated market. So the change and reform and climate change risk areas, they continue to be assessed as worsening over the quarter. These risks remain affected by external drivers, with continued uncertainty and the complexity of the central government reform programs. So we're continuing to work closely with government and agencies, both so we can fully understand the detail of the reform programs, and also so that we can explore ways in which to communicate that external information back into our community. One further comment on the change and reform area that's not included in the report is just to highlight the necessity for council to remain agile in the event of changes to how central government approaches further COVID resurgence. Is while our response to date's worked well, we may need to change quickly to reflect changes in direction ahead. So otherwise, thank you for your time, and the leadership team and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Jane, that's a very helpful. Just wait a sec. We're just getting a bit of change in the sound here. Is that working better? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Jane, for that. That's a very helpful and insightful summary of the risks. I appreciate that. Abel, your hand's up, buddy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to focus on the COVID impact that you identified, Jane, and with regards to the works program service delivery. Do we have any idea of the financial risks associated with some of those? Surely there must be some financial implications on that.
Yes, I probably am perhaps not the best person to answer to that. I wonder if there's anyone in the leadership team who'd like to speak to that.
I've got Nick down here. So Nick, just to make certain that you can be heard, do I turn this off, or can you think you can talk and we'll let everybody hear?
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Brilliant. Yes, we can. Thanks, Nick.
So through you, Mr. Chair, sorry. So just to answer that for you, Abel, we've just got a little bit of feedback in here. Okay. So we're still working through it at the moment, Abel. We effectively have been working through all the live contracts in the last month. We haven't got a total overview of the dollars yet. But what has changed from last year is the COVID response from the contractors was very unknown. Since this time, a lot of contracts have changed to incorporate clauses in regards to pandemics, which obviously assists us as the client, but also gives more clarity on what the contractors can and can't claim. So it's likely that we'll see more claims this time round than when we did last year, just because of the knowledge that's now in the industry. But in regards to the actual dollar value, I don't have that on me at this stage, Abel, but happy to bring that back to council.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to follow on for that, is there some sort of formula within the contracts now that provides that basis for the additional claim?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, there is. So after last year's lockdown, it was very unknown, and a lot of contracts were very weak for both sides, for both the contractor and for the client to understand what they're legally required to pay or not pay. So last year we reviewed all of those contracts and changed clauses to ensure that it was fair across the contracting fraternity and the client. So those contracts have been included.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Julie, can you hear us now, please? Your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question on the proposed mitigations. Is there any? Are they time bound? Do we have an actual plan in behind that?
Which ones Julie?
I think most of the strategic risks have proposed mitigations, like, well, on page 47 for the compliance and fraud, and there's proposed mitigations, a monthly team leader forum to undertake stock take. So, you know, it seems that that's just a matter of getting it done, or start. Is that in work? Is it planned and documented?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The proposed mitigations don't, where they have time constraints, they are actually articulated in different documentation to what you're receiving, I'm afraid. These are often items that are under discussion that are not yet confirmed. Where they are confirmed, they are ones that are not yet being undertaken. So the monthly team leaders forums are already underway. Undertaking a stock take is something that has been, as an idea that's been put forward, it hasn't yet been undertaken.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can I just follow that up though, Jane? Can we assume that the proposed mitigations will actually be over time undertaken?
Yes, they are discussed each quarter with the leadership team, and they're moved up into the current, or an update will be placed against them each quarter in terms of where and how they are progressing.
It sounded like the accountant, I presume, if the proposed mitigations have a cost attached to it, that we've allowed for those in our plans.
I can't speak to that. I would imagine, yes, if they were going to be moved into the current, they would have to be part of a work program and be planned for.
Great. Okay. Members, any more questions that other members would like to ask Jane? Look, Jane, I mean, again, thank you very much for a very good summary. And look, it is interesting to note that 3 of our key items are worsening. I guess actually I probably had 2 questions, and one probably, Jane, goes straight back to Nick. Abel's asked about the COVID costs and the extension of time clauses and lots of drama that's inside there. In terms of the general position of the supply chain, do you think we will face price inflation on our $51 million capital program for the current year? And what will we do if that happens?
Through you, Mr. Chair. At the moment, we're seeing definitely delays in material supplies, predominantly around building type materials, which are pushing projects out by 2 to 3 months at this stage. So there's definitely a cost related to that. In regards to the overall capital works program, a lot of the work hasn't been procured yet, so we do have the ability to scope back. For the likes of roading, for an example, is a program of work. So effectively, if costs are going up, it means that we're doing less kilometres of road. So while the budget's not being expended or going over, it means that we won't be able to deliver as much. The industry has been talking around potential for 30% increase in costs. But to date, there hasn't really been any analytics on that.
Thanks for that, Nick. And it's probably me wearing my different hats around this town, but I have wondered whether, in fact, there may be even scope, if you aren't already working with the other local authorities. I have a concern that we might end up competing for the same contractor. Certainly elsewhere in the country, I see there are local authorities working together to provide and work with the contractor community. I'm not saying that's a big risk down here, but it's one that I would raise as a potential if you're not doing it already, Nick. So I'd put it there. Jane, one other question I had was, while it's static, our relations and reputation remain a high risk. I wonder, just give me a sense of why we would assess it as being a residual high risk, please.
I think we're looking at, sorry, I'm just trying to get it in front of me now. We're definitely looking at our network into the community is how we do our business, and maintaining those relationships has to be of high importance to us in order to keep our position as a trusted organisation with our community. So we've kept those in terms of relationship damage. We do see those, that loss of collaborative partnership with our stakeholders as being a residual risk of high if we don't get this right. I think aspects of it, reputational damage, do drop down, but that relationship damage, we've continued to assess that as being of very high importance to our community, high importance to our community, even after mitigations.
Brilliant. So look, I hear your point that we are very sensitive to the nature of relationships. Is there any particular action at the moment that is key for us in terms of any particular stakeholder?
The work that we're doing, certainly with our community boards, making sure that we're getting that, addressing the trust deficit, I think, that we're having into our community is certainly work that we're doing to mitigate in that area.
Yes.
And also just establishing, making sure that we're addressing any iwi disconnect that we have into the community too.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Thank you for that, and Nick as well. Are there any other questions from members? Just as we perhaps move to the recommendations, let's note that at least one, which I think is within our control, is actually improving. We'll take the gains and we get them, won't we, Jane, with data and systems? Yes. So it does reflect that actually what we are doing through this is that we are providing focus, hopefully for management, and I think that's really important as a committee that we're comfortable with those ratings at the moment. I am personally, thank you for those statements. I think there's a sense to which the worsening ones we have to take as a given. The only question might be other things, Nick, as I've suggested, might be possible, but the reality of it is that actually we need to be comfortable that those risks, state high, is that the plural? I don't know, statuses, are ones that from a risk appetite perspective as a council committee, we are happy with. So when we move to the motions, we're actually saying, we're comfortable, well, we understand those risk ratings. Our risk appetite is that we will live with those. Obviously, there is proposed mitigations by staff and ongoing mitigations, but we aren't trying to increase the effort in any one of those areas. That is the value of what Jane's given us, is actually our chance with our risk antennae to endorse where we're at the moment. So can we move to the motion, please, which thank you, Fiona, which has been amended. We received the report, which is A, B, and C, that we have met the conditions of the Local Government Act for decision making, and D, I'm just going to take straight up front, has changed, and I think, Jane, you have signalled this anyway. We endorse those risks considered a significant issue being reported on to Council at its 27th of October meeting 2021, and that's a substitute for what was previously the Community and Strategy Committee. So as Jane has indicated, it's now is a resolution that says it will go straight to Council. Can I just check? That's the full report will go to Council, I presume, which includes all the information that we've got. Good. Yeah. No, that's really, really important. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so look, that's it, noting that the amendment is that we will send it straight to Council. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder down the line? Thank you, Paul. Any discussion on the motion? In that case, I will put the motion, please. All those in favour, please raise their hands and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those against? I'll take that as carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Right, we're slightly delayed, but let's move to item 7.3, which is the interim performance report, and let's see where we get to with that one. It's on page, if I can get it right, 69 of your agenda. Thank you. So somewhere, hopefully, Shannon and Jason are not too far away. They are there. Shannon, Jason, I'll leave it to you guys to lead us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. So I will take this report as read. So this report presents the results of the final interim performance report for the financial year for your information. Listed in the report are all the key performance indicators or KPIs and the agreed targets and results against those targets. There are a total of 113 KPIs. Of those, 88 are external, and these external ones are put into the annual report to report back to the community on how well we did against the year for the targets we set. These particular set of KPIs are measured against the long-term plan 2018 to 2028, and today is the final time that they will be used. The results are entered, as I said, into the annual report and are audited. So the reason these are the last time these are used are the new KPIs were a set of KPIs were adopted in July when we adopted LTP 2021 to 31, and we will be using those going forward for this new financial year. The amount of KPIs in that LTP we had reduced to around 60. So this allows for a more focused approach on those KPIs. So going back to this report, so for the June 2021 reporting period, the results were that 73 or 65% of the KPIs were achieved, and 40 or 35% were not achieved. At the end of last financial year, the result was 68% were achieved and 32% were not achieved. In the report, we have listed all of the 40 KPIs that were not achieved, and we've further identified any that may pose a high risk to council with yellow highlight within the table. The next report on the next interim performance report will be at the December meeting, and that again, as I said, will report on the new LTP KPIs. So we've got some activity managers present in the leadership team and ourselves, and we're happy to answer any questions regarding this report.
Thank you, Shannon. That's great. Jason, before I hand over to Abel, is any comments that you wanted to make, mate?
No, again, I just think important to notice that level of consistency we've had through the interim performance report. We sort of generally hover around that 65 to 70 across the, particularly over the last 2 years. And obviously there's a few KPIs in there that were set back in 2018 that are not as relevant now at the end of this cycle. So again, as Shannon highlighted, looking forward to moving on to the next more focused KPI stage. But again, it just sort of shows a level of consistency across the LTP period. But yes, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jason. Abel, thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Great to see there's going to be a reduction in the number of KPIs. As you know, I've been an advocate for that for quite some time, and get the organisation better focus on those. So just a question as to when we may see the draft 60 KPIs that we could view.
Through the chair, those 60 KPIs that I mentioned are in the 2021 LTP document and under the activity sections in there. I will send you a copy of those, but they're already publicly available within that LTP document.
Okay, my apologies. Yeah, you're right. They were there. Thanks.
hopefully you've given them a pretty good thorough looking at, Abel.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, no, it slipped my mind. So I do appreciate it. Thanks.
Don't worry, cover. My mind slips a lot these days as well. Can I just check though, Shannon, when will we get our first report against those new? Will that be in September, or either for the next meeting for the quarter?
Yes, through the chair, the next reporting period will end in October. So then I think the next scheduled Financial Instruments Committee report will be at the December meeting. Right.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for that. Okay. Sorry. Are there any more questions from councillors? Yes, John.
Yes. Thank you, Bruce. So Shannon, one of the ones that did stand out was the residents' satisfaction with council decision making. We're going to target of 85% and we achieved 37%. Can you give us some background there? Were there some specific areas that stood out more than others where residents were less than satisfied with our performance? Or, is it the messaging that we're getting out that is perhaps not getting through?
And could I just thank you, John, for that question, because this exactly was going to be my first one. But could I just add to John's question, Shannon and Jason, which is if you go one above, while it's not hitting target, we've got 80% satisfaction that they have confidence in our decision making. The one that John's highlighted is that we don't make decisions that represent the interests of the district or the local needs, which is an interesting counter. So if you give us a sense of that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, John, for your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you'll note in the commentary there was a mixed bag of verbatim comments from the respondents to the survey around the results that they gave for those, including the other thing to bear in mind that I'd just also like to add is we were conducting this survey around the same time as the LTP consultation. So there was a number of dissatisfaction within the community as to the proposed rates increase. So they may have had an impact on the, possibly had an impact on the results of this survey. There's probably another thing to add. I believe that the sort of different levels. So as far as the local decision making, that may be reflected around the change of community board structure that had been embedded in. So they may have felt there's less of a local voice than in the past, but I'm just presuming things here. So there's probably a number of factors as to why those results were significantly lower than the previous time. But I think last time it was still only relatively low as well. It was only about 44%. So that's a couple of things there. I think Mr. Donegan may have some other comments.
Yeah, great question, actually, because again, being my second year through this IPR, that stood out to me also. And I think one issue here may be actually about how the survey is calculated, because both this year and the previous year, you've seen a substantial difference between the, I guess, the level of satisfaction for 25.1A and 25.1B. And I see Ms. Stevenson has popped up online there too, who might want to make some comment around that. But I think there's a slight difference in terms of how the first KPI is calculated by those that undertake the survey, and then also versus the second one there around representing local and district needs. But Ms. Stevenson's got a hand up there to add some further input there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We did question this quite a lot with the company who undertake the survey, and it's the way in which they respond to agree, not agree, strongly agree, etc. And for one of them, they use a certain word, and for the second one, they use a different word, and then they gather up agrees and strongly agrees in the first one, but do not include the agrees in the second one. They use agree and disagree. So it's the way that they're grouping together that middle section, if you like, people who are sitting in that neutral zone. So we did question this with them, and for the purposes of consistency over the couple of years, we made the decision to keep it as it was so that we could have analysis against what had happened in the previous year, which was the 44%.
Thanks, Michelle. John, was there any follow-up question you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm reasonably satisfied there. I think, though, there's a lesson that, perhaps council could celebrate its successes a little more, and that might counter some of the negative stuff that we do get back from a certain segment in the community.
Agreed. Can I just also, Michelle, Jason and Shannon, just join also comments from Jane under our prior paper with risks, where you've both mentioned the community board, shall we say, trust deficit, and that does reflect that we are acknowledging a strategic risk. And I'm not, I'm sounding like I'm preaching, I probably am here, but obviously, again, not inconsistent with John's words about celebrating our success. There clearly is something here that I presume will exercise ELT's mind, if not already, that we have a strategic risk. We have a result here which, even though it might be imperfect, still reflects a trend year on year. So I'll leave that with as a sort of a rhetorical statement from on high, and leave it there. John, by the way, I assume that you've asked your question. Unless you've got another one, you need to lower your hand if that's okay. You just need, I think, click on the yellow hand. Are there more questions from members at this stage? I've got a couple. Oh, sorry, Paul, have you got one? No, you go for it, mate. You're next.
Some of them are quite minor, but I just wondered, page 78 was mentioned about the toilet vandalism at Cozy Knock. Do we actually have insurance for those events? And secondly, regarding toilets, there was a complaint coming about a toilet that was actually really related to another council area. I'm just wondering, when that type of thing happens, do we pass on to that other council that has happened? And I saw also on that page 78 about the tree survey of 5,600 trees. What do we do as a result of that survey? Is that about ongoing maintenance of them, or is that something we just sort of file away for future knowledge, or what is the purpose that comes out of that? On page 84, I see the GDP figure for Southland is something like, if I've read it right, $65 per capita roughly. But for New Zealand, it's about 5 or 6 times that at 300 and something. So I'm just wondering what's behind that. And also there's a B at the end of both those figures. What does that mean? Page 94, I see the cost of wastewater connections is about $663, I think. And I know that our wastewater charge is about $450, if I've got that right. And I'm just wondering about the difference. How does that come about? Is that capital expenditure on the, say, Tianao scheme, or is that some other thing that makes those two figures different? And also, just the page 102, the difference in the budgeted cost for our parks and reserves at $77 against the final figure per hectare of 701 is a massive difference, even though it states that it was expected it would be exceeded, but still that's a massive difference.
Thank you. Well, there's quite a wee list there. And I don't know whether you've got the chance to answer those at this stage, Shannon, or do you need more time? Would it be better if Paul's perhaps give you a list of those, although I think we'd be interested in some of the answers.
Just a clarification through the chair. It was a wee bit hard to hear Councillor Duffy there through a second mic. And maybe if we could, if there's a couple there that you want immediate answers on, we can try and answer those now. If we go back to them, maybe one at a time. But there were a few questions there. So.
All right. I just wonder what would make Paul better heard. My technical man down there, is there a suggestion there? Why did we hear you so well, Nick, and not Paul? No idea. Authoritative voice, is that right? No.
He's got something more big. Whoever's got the mic on, let's connect that device to the Jabra.
Yeah, which is here, and I think we can. Oh, where was it? Yeah, we're connected over here.
The other option would be I just contact them later.
Yes. Are there any particular ones, Paul, that you think the committee should know an answer to right at the moment? Rightio. So look, we have agreed with Paul that he'll there are some very good questions in the middle of that. We'll get him to email those or contact you, Shannon and Jason, with those. Are there any other questions from members? I do have a couple, Jason. So John's was probably my big one. Can I just check something here? It's minor and it's sort of more of a legal compliance, not that you'd expect it coming out of it. But I noticed on page 74, we had the measure of number of serious injuries to the public from dog attacks. I shouldn't be laughing. I'm not laughing actually at it. It's the nature of my question. You propose to run training courses with couriers and posties, which I think is actually a really good idea. I just wondered what was the nature of that training and were there any issues of privacy? For instance, would we be disclosing addresses that we may hold on our database as being problem addresses? which could give rise to privacy. I'm just wondering whether we do any form of legal check over the nature of our training, which makes a lot of sense to me with couriers and posties.
I can answer that, Mr. Robertson. So we did run a workshop, I think 3 years ago, exactly the same thing to couriers and those kinds of professions, and it was very successful. It was a generic workshop. There weren't any details of dog owners or any identifying information released. It was just a generic training program from a dog expert from Dunedin, I think it was. So we're basically looking at repeating that probably April, May next year.
Great. No.
You go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, Michael, keep going. Sorry, I thought you'd finished, but it sounded like you had more to say. Please keep going.
I just want to reassure you that there's no private details released during those workshops. It's purely a knowledge-based generic workshop.
Brilliant. Well, Michael, it just shows you how my mind works, that I'm thinking systems here. So thank you for that assurance thing. And actually, can I just endorse the work that you're doing? I think it's actually smart if we're helping the community in the way in which they relate to each other. I do really hold that as being good. Look, my final question, Shannon, just to check, is paragraph 26 of your report. We say that a number of those we must include mandatory DIA measures. That's probably, I think, around 3 waters, etc. You say here, these are the ones that where there may be risk to council if these continue to not be achieved in the future without appropriate action being taken. So it begs the question, are we taking appropriate action? Because the DIA, I'm sure, and I mean this in the spirit of a good spirit, will be monitoring us. So what is the action, and are we taking it? Silence reigns supreme, huh?
I can, through the chair, I'll provide a bit of comment on that, maybe just for clarification too, is obviously around KPIs, where you see a consistent level of underperformance, it's certainly going to attract more attention. I think maybe that's what that statement is trying to say, is that where we have a measure that may be not achieved in a certain period or year for any certain reason, particularly around the DIA performance measures, that if that is not seen to be have program improvement or continues to worsen over time, it's through the audit process, it certainly will attract more attention. So it's something that we just need to be mindful of, and that's why we have highlighted those ones in this report as a potential risk to council. One-off, we don't think that they provide significant risk at this point. Again, in our feedback through previous reporting processes from Audit New Zealand has been generally positive, but again, I guess going back to, for example, we had the issues through the annual report last year around our valuations. So again, those sort of things, making sure that we are then updating those and getting those right each year is an important part of that process.
Right, so if I just make certain I check this correctly, Jason, and perhaps just rereading or rethinking my question through, there is no particular measure at the moment that you're indicating we should be concerned about from either an externally generated or a trend basis that might, if you will, constitute in quotation marks a risk, but you are just reflecting the importance that we keep our eye on these.
Yes.
There we are, look at that. Sorry, that was such a long question to get to such a short answer. Yes, Shannon?
Just further to that, just to provide a little bit more clarification, that paragraph 26, the table above, the ones that Audit have identified as having materiality, we have achieved the majority of those. It's more in that main table of the full list of the 40 KPIs where we had some that we were just trying to highlight to the committee that these were DIA measures, and so just for their information as well, that they have the potential to propose a potentially higher risk as well. So if that makes sense, because it can be a little bit confusing reading it from looking at the table above where they're all achieved. versus the main table where some of the DIA measures are not achieved.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that point. And perhaps since there's no more questions, I just want to wrap up, and it probably almost goes back to your original question, Abel, which is actually the measures we do have count. That they are reflections of our level of service, and achievement or non-achievement should be something that should be of concern to us. And I think we're pointing out here that there are external parties, not just our ratepayers, who may be interested ultimately somewhere down the track in terms of our performance. So the 60 that Abel has alluded to and you've adopted through the LTP are ones which we must focus on. And I mean, I notice even Nick, you're saying with under the previous item with COVID pressure, we might have to rescope projects which may ultimately impact on our levels of service. So this report, Shannon, is really important. So thank you to you and Jason and Michelle for the detail you put into it, because it's one that we must monitor on a regular basis, because it may well give rise to noting of risks. So I make assumption that there are no more questions from my colleagues. Are there final whip round for questions? There being none, can we move to the motion, please? Which is that we receive the report, which doesn't quite sort of say thank you enough for what I think is a very good report. So can I just again say thank you to the Michelle, Jason and Shannon for your report. I'll move that we receive the report, noting also I think we've complied with the appropriate sections of the Act. Do I have a seconder, please, down the line? Thank you, Paul. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, raise their hands and say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Can we move to the analysis of actual results to forecast for last year? This is good. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on the actual financial results for the 2021 financial year compared to the final forecasted budget, which was approved by Council in April. The overall operating income is $3.3 million, or 4% less than forecasted. The key reasons for the variances are detailed for each activity in paragraphs 10 to 15 of the report. The operating expenditure is $4.2 million, or 5% less than forecast, and the reasons are discussed in paragraph 17 to 21 of the report. The rest of the report is taken as read, and I would be happy to try and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions that people would like to start on the financial results? Okay, look, I've got probably just a couple that I would like to focus on. We'll obviously have another crack at this. We'll have obviously a view when we get the draft annual report, which this reflects on. But I just wondered if I could raise a few points. One, firstly, is clearly the surplus on 85 million is sort of, can I be honest without sounding too crazy, is neither here nor there. It's a good result, but it's essentially a break-even result, even though 876,000 is not to be sneezed at. Is that, by the way, liable to change in our final annual report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, could I get back to you on that? I'm not sure.
Look, don't worry. I
sure.
just wondered whether, in fact, we'd done all our provisioning and what have you, which could give rise to changes to the actual results. If we haven't done it.
I'm not sure Cherie's on the call. Sorry.
Cherie, are you on the call? Are you able to help us with that? No? No, it doesn't matter. Okay, can I just check on one explanation here? If I've read this correctly, our income is not as high as forecast. We are $3.3 million down, correct?
Yes.
And yet it seemed to me that we were only saying the net surplus variance, this is under the explanation, is due to a combination of income being higher than forecasted.
I think this, through you, Mr. Chair, this comment about the higher than forecasted, but relates to the forestry, because our forestry was budgeted to have a devaluation and we in fact had a revaluation. So I think the explanation was trying to just talk about the forestry in that instance when it was talking about the higher than forecasted income. But overall, yes, operating
Overall
income is
income's
lower.
down.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Sorry, that didn't
I
come up.
was probably looking for the bigger reason why the income had gone down rather than the fact that you're right. I mean, I appreciated that forestry had gone up, but be it as it may, that's been more than compensated for by lower operating expenditure, and you deal with that well, which is good. Just so then a couple of questions on paragraph 12, which is on page 105. We talk about the Lower Hollyford Road, and we say the physical work was promptly completed prior to June, but staff have been able to get clarification from Wakate that all emergency works were completed and invoiced by year end. Is there any risk around being able to get this money, or is it just a matter of timing to get the claim finalised? I'm probably looking past you down to the end of the table here to my engineers to see if there's any answer to that. Is there any particular risk around the Hollyford Road claim?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, not to our understanding.
Sweet, that's good. That's cracker. It's a timing issue. It's a matter of just getting things through.
If we understand it for less than anticipated, it's just the timing of the final claim.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good. There'll be a positive debtor in our annual report. It won't have a provision against it. Look, just in the next paragraph, and again, I'm looking down probably your end, Matt, and it just was a little question here. This is the Te Anau wastewater project. Last sentence was completion of the project will depend on how and when issues bound through commissioning can be resolved. Have we got a budget issue here, or is this again just a matter of straightforward dealing with the commissioning issues? Hand it to Nick. Okay, you got a couple of moments to compare. That's fine. Okay, just to know the story there, if that's okay.
As we understand it, still finalising the issue program.
Yep.
And as to whether or not there's going to be an impact on program and dollars, that's not as yet finalised and clear.
Pretty much that's a reasonable summary at the moment.
Yeah.
Due to COVID lockdowns as well, we have some of the commissioning team are actually at Auckland. So we're still working through the challenges there as well.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. The reason I partly asked this is not trying to unearth something, but I'm just thinking about some of the issues that Anne and her team have trying to finalise the financial statements, and actually questions about where does work in progress sit, should it be expensed, should it be capitalised, where should we be? These questions have some quite direct impacts on those. So I'm interested to know ultimately. We'll get there when it comes to the annual report, but I was just wondering whether there was any comment on that one at the moment. So thank you for that.
It remains a live risk for the organisation.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Showing the fact that I'm trying to earn my keep every now and then as an accountant, can I look at paragraph 19, please, where regulatory services was 600,000, the thick end of, below forecast. It was due to staff vacancies and underspends, yada, 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 and resource shortages. So that's not surprising in the current environment within the sector. Look, I must confess I should have gone back to the prior report, but how did that go against actual performance? I don't know whether perhaps somebody should be on the line that might be able to help me. We've still been able to basically achieve our consenting requirements for we're understaffed.
So the building team have significantly been able to achieve their compliance.
Yeah.
And being able to pull that back, because at the beginning of the year, you will remember there was, of the financial year, there was some issues around the resourcing. They've managed to fully populate their team now, and so that's looking good. The planning team, on the other hand, there's still some issues there, and so timeframes are occasionally going over. So that's the area which is probably the most struggle at the moment.
So is it fair to say then, Fran, that the savings were made in the early part of the year, if I can call them savings, the underachievement, but because we have become fully populated, it's generally meant that over the year we've been able to maintain our consenting discipline. I hear your point about the planning being and presumably resource consents being under pressure. Its own right should interest us, but in effect, this is saving from earlier on in the financial year.
Correct. Pulling resources from some of the other aspects, which so district plan, for example, to assist with the RC, resource consent processing component, which has put other pieces of work, pushed them further out. So yes, you're correct.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Fran. Members, are there any questions that you would like to raise? Yes, Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification, paragraph 24 makes reference around the Mount Cycle Trail unspent of 270,000. I make the assumption that's the money from MB. And also under 27, number 27, there are 20 projects that have been deleted. Were they of just a minor matter, or were they still quite significant?
Now, before they get an answer to that, Margie has just said that she's struggling to hear. Margie, are you able to indicate, was that when Matt and Nick were speaking? That might be a dumb question because you probably didn't hear them. Or is that generally me?
No, you're fine. It's just a couple coming in around the chamber.
I suspect that was when Nick and Matt spoke about Te Anau wastewater and the likes. So we'll just better make certain we can check on that one. Okay, Margie, we'll do our best to thank you for your note. We'll try and pick that one up. So, Abel, sorry, I butted in. 20 minor projects dropped off. Well, 20 projects dropped off. Assume that they're minor. Sorry, and your first question, Abel, was?
With relation to item 24, there's 270,000 there of unspent money. I presume that's funds coming via MB. That's not ratepayers' money.
Right. The answer to both is yes. Sorry, and I've had hand signals from Matt to say that the answer to both your questions, Abel, is yes.
That's right. Just good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. No, good questions, mate. Okay, any other questions folk would like to raise? Can we move to the recommendation then, please, which is that we receive the report. At all. We don't say that we've complied with the Act. We will say we've complied with the Act. But look, I do appreciate the effort of you, Joni, to marshal the troops to get together a report. That's always valuable, and this is useful. And as I want to stress to our council members, we have another crack at this when we come back with the draft annual report. But again, it just reflects the importance of actually what our outturn is relative to our desired levels of service. So the motion is that we receive the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Don. I've got some very helpful friends down the line here. So it's moved and seconded that we receive the report. All those in favour, please raise their hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Moving along, if we could then move to the monthly financial report, please. And I think, is it Leslie's going to talk to us? Thank you, which would be great. Or was that Leslie or Anne? Somebody's going to speak to.
A few technical issues.
Oh, hey, how are you?
It decided to freeze up on me just as you were coming to me. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm here to talk about the August financial report, which is for the first 2 months of the new financial year. And I would like you to have taken it as read, but would also like to just highlight a couple of points. The first being that this report is similar, but not exactly the same as the one that we've seen in the past. We have altered it to reflect the new activities in the LTP, which are now 7. Along with that, we've included the corporate services, which was previously part of district leadership. And these are spread over all of the other activities their costs are, but we wanted to highlight these separately for you. A number of the variances, and the light goes out in this room too, gosh. We're just trying to... a number of the variances in this report relate to the carry forwards that were approved by Council on the 15th of September. So the costs that have been budgeted in the previous financial year that have flown through into the first couple of months of this current year. So we turn to page 118, we'll see that the operating income has a variance of 315,000. This is actually 2% higher, not lower than the budget year to date. In here, we have a higher transport income from Wakakatui than we had budgeted. And also too, we've just noted there about the increase in the overall funding for the first 3 years of the LTP that came through earlier this month. The staff are working through at the moment to incorporate this 2.158 million into this year's program, and we'll come back to discuss options and related funding to the committee and council. Also to note there that we've received the second instalment of the Three Waters stimulus funding of just over $3 million. This was received in August and had been anticipated to be received in November. Operating expenditure is 1.3 million, 7% below budget year to date at 15.7 versus 17 million. One of the key components of that is in community resources and around parks and reserves and streetscape costs. Maintenance and mowing, of course, are less over the winter months, with most of the spend happening in spring and summer. Another variance is around the investment operating costs. As everybody will be aware, the council is in the process of changing the borrowing strategy, which has not yet commenced during this period, so that we've had a lower level of external borrowing, which has directly impact on the internal costs. And you'll notice on the flip side, under the income, there was also less income along with this. Capital expenditure is ahead of budget, 450,000, which is 10% given the time of the year that we're at. And most of that is around the carry forward projects being completed or moved forward in July and August, with the budget sets to move forward. The most significant of that was under water supply, where the capital costs were 347 higher, 200 of that variance related to carry forward projects, and the remainder is a difference to delivering earlier than expected some of the stimulus projects around the compliance instrumentation. If we just like to note that at this point in time, we have borrowed $20 million short term from the LGFA while the borrowing strategy is implemented. And I welcome any questions.
Thank you for that, Leslie. A very good summary of the key points. Members, are there questions that you'd like to raise for Leslie? It's an accountant's delight. So I'll go first. Oh no, we'll let John go first. Got to hear from a farmer. Go for it, mate.
Can't hear him.
John, you're on mute, buddy. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, is that better this time?
Yeah, you're well. Thank you, John.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. In terms of where are we at with joining the LGFA and accessing the cheaper borrowing rates?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've already joined, and that $20 million that Leslie was just talking about has been borrowed from the LGFA.
Right, and can we confirm the interest rate on that?
It was over a couple of rates. So I'd come back to you on it. Yeah, because I don't have those figures off the top of my head right now.
Okay, thank you.
Look, I would presume, and I know we will get John the Treasury reports, which is obviously logical given that we're now members of LGFA. Yeah, you might recall we had a workshop with PwC, and they indicated a whole bunch of the financial and prudential limits that go with it. You might recall we talked about coverage of interest rate risks, lack of concentration or mitigating concentration of debt repayment risks, etc. Those will become a more formal and normal part of our business, where I'd expect to see that seen in the future, including our weighted average cost of debt, which is exactly, I think, the point that you are very keen to know about, and I suspect we'll be keen to know about relative to what we're earning by way of interest in terms of our investments, because it's a key part of the financial strategy that we're now following. So I suspect that will come in the future, which will be good. Thanks, John. Did you have more questions, or are there other questions from other members? Can I just ask a question, Leslie, or a couple, four in fact. If I was to go to going to page 119, there is the mention around Waka Kotahi, which has been challenging over the course of the LTP. What I wanted to note was, or question was, the second paragraph in them was actually a number of road safety projects and reduced speeds around school is 2.7 compared to a request for 4.5. Again, we then say the funds approved relate to projects we put forward which aligned with their safety assessment tool. While this is not reflecting the variances, it may have an impact on future reports. Now, that could be just a straight, simple fact that we'll have future variances around this. Is this hinting that about anything around safety around schools that's worrying us, or we won't be able to deliver what we hope to do? I just wondered if I could understand more what was all meant by that, please.
I might defer to the roading team if there's anybody on board.
Hartley's there. Hartley, I understand, Hartley, you're on. Can you help me with that one, please, Hartley?
Yes, Mr. Chair, welcome to. So it's not so much around the schools, because we got a good chunk of the funding for the schools, and that particularly relates to a reduction around speed limits, with our key focus being on the higher speed limits for rural schools, bringing those from 100 down to 60, and then at a later date looking at the more urban schools, bringing them down to a 30 or 40 kilometre, in line with the road to zero effort of getting reductions over the next 10 years across all schools. So we did get a good chunk of the money around that. In terms of the reduction for other activities, it's more where we'd have a, say, intersection improvement or some seal widening that we maybe applied for that didn't line up with the assessment tool. And we didn't obtain funding for that. The ones that we did obtain funding for tended to be where there was a crash history around serious and fatal crashes. Those are the ones that we did obtain funding for, where there was a clear crash history.
Yeah, so there is one can argue then we have, not that we've got the right amount, because I totally take on point that we were bidding for $4 million, but at least from a safety perspective, it is targeted at our higher risk areas. And I presume that for Leslie, you're saying that effectively that last line about variances going forward will be more the matter that actually we don't have the funding, so we either won't be doing what we want to do, or it's going to have to fund it ourselves in effect.
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay. Next question, I guess, is actually, if I just check on 122, where we reflect on CapEx, I just want to check. We essentially are saying we plan to spend $4 million this month, and we have. Am I right? Isn't that good? Isn't that good news, guys? You're dancing down on the tables down there, right? You've got to be. Oh, that's tremendous. This needs to be a focus for us all, because the challenge is a very high CapEx program, and the fact that in what is it, second month of the year, we're actually on target. It's superb. We should be very happy about that. Guys, are you excited? I would be. The challenge is to keep it up next month. In the following 10 months, that's the problem. But well done. I just thought we should note that. And look, I think the other thing, John, you've really hinted at that on page 127, was the change in our balance sheet. And I hope, members, that you, John, obviously you did pick that up, which is starting to move, moving towards our new financial strategy of making and accessing the cheap debt through LGFA, and separating it out from our investments, which we're treating elsewise, with the benefit, hopefully, of reducing overall costs to the ratepayer, given what internal loans were previously costing us. So we now have $20 million on our borrowings under current liabilities, which we now know is subject to you getting a full range of presumably longer term debt in place, and also that our cash and cash equivalents have suddenly jumped up. I think I'm reading that right, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, members, that's where we're at. Right, can we, are there any other questions for folk in terms of the results? Leslie and Anne, well done. It's pretty quick into the year, and I know you're trying to deal with annual reports as well. So getting out to us good, timely monthly information is really superb. So I do appreciate that. Simple motion is to receive Leslie's report, again, on the assumption that we're complying with it. I'll move that. Paulie seconding. Thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, John. Those against? It's carried. That's great. Right. Overall work program. Anne, I think it's you rather than Kate.
Yes, it is me. Thank you very much. So yes, we just wanted to present this report, which we've been sort of doing on an annual basis, which just outlines the work program for the 21-22 year as a reflection after we've approved the carry forward budgets from 2021, which were adopted by Council on the 15th of September. So just to update the committee now, there were 106 items that were carried forward into this year, which were a mixture of both operational and capital expenditure. The total of those items came to around $4 million, of which the two major items were the Three Water stimulus funding of around 1.4 million and the Te Anau wastewater MB funding and related costs, which is around $1 million. So I think the key for this, of course, to note is that the carry forwards are typically around 40%. The carry forward for this year is 40%, and that's around 51 of the 129 projects. It makes up, although it's 40%, it makes up about 12% in monetary value, being only represented of 3.42 million. Now, this compares to last year, which was around 30% of carry forwards, but that carry forward amount was making up 29% of dollars. So overall, what's happened is the dollar value's gone down, but the quantity's gone up. And I think that's reflective of a lot of those small community facilities projects that have been moved. So this means that overall for the works program for 21-22, there's 199 projects. This is around about 3.6. The total increase in the budget is 3.6 million. So that's adding to the 28 million that's already budgeted, and that's before the roading program. So that's around the 31. So otherwise, I will take this report as read.
Thank you, Anne. That's very helpful. So this builds on the impact of the work you did adopting the carry forwards at a prior meeting. Do we have questions from folk? We're waiting for your 10:30 meeting, eh? I do actually have a question. Look, Anne, thank you. And you have strongly characterised that we should have proportionality around what are the carry forwards, 51 of 129. But I think you're reflecting a relatively, about to say small beer, that's an incredibly inexact statement, but actually represent a much smaller proportion of cost. Equally, when I cast my eye down those carry forwards, if I reflect back to at least two previous papers, they're often in our local communities, so I can understand, hence a desire to get them done. So that raises for me a question: what's the plan? Okay, what's the plan that we don't sit here with another 30 or 40%, albeit small dollars, but actually are critical to our communities in terms of when you go down that list, you see a lot of them are those small improvements which are all good and helpful for us to actually do. G'day, Christine, how are you? Welcome. What is the plan? If I can ask that question, I don't know who I'm asking it of, but I'm asking it either you, Anne, or perhaps the chaps down the end of the table. Nick, and I just want to check as you speak, Nick, that Margie can hear you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Can you hear that, Margie?
Yeah, I can hear that. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Nick.
Great. So just for some clarification, and Anne gave a little bit of it in regards to the capital works and the carry forward values. Around 3.6 million was related to capital. 1.1 to 1.4 of that relates to the stimulus projects, which are already contracted and underway. So they're all due to be completed by June next year. We've just had an extension of time on that from the DIA due to the current lockdown. 1.4 million of that 3.4 are projects that are already underway and contracted, likes of the Winton Library. So contracts already in place. 150,000 of that relates to project related to playgrounds, which we made the decision to actually move into the collated playground works for the 21-22, which leaves around 750 out of the total $42 million delivered last year. Effectively falls into the downer operational small contract works and some of the community facilities type works that you talked on as well. In regards to what the plan is, early in the year we presented to council and obviously had signed off the works program, which seen 160 projects collated down to effectively 80 programs of work. That ethos still continues. So these smaller projects are still being put into packages of work so that it's not another additional 40 or 50 projects to deliver.
Yeah. So you're looking, in effect, what I'm hearing, Nick, is you're looking for more creative ways in which these projects can be completed rather than just relying on the same old plan, which will deliver up to us 30% uncompleted projects at the end of the coming year.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. This year was the first year we started to collate projects into effectively more programs of work. We also did an engagement process with around 40 odd contractors from the region this year. What came very clear from them is they would actually like to see longer term contracts into possibly 3 years of work, i.e. tree work, maintenance contracts and the like, or small capital works, so they can resource adequately for more than 1 year. So that's ongoing planning and consultation we're continuing with our smaller contractors as well.
Brilliant.
I might just add to that, Mr. Chairman. As part of the procurement strategy development process, we also produced for the first time project scopes, which were signed off by community boards ahead of the start of the year, which ensures that we don't have to, on a project by project basis, go back to each community board. We've done the work up front, we've finalised the scope, we've established the budget and got those project scopes signed off, which effectively means shackles are off. We can go and deliver the works. So it doesn't miss the step; it just undertakes that step more efficiently.
Brilliant. That's good to know. I hope that's, and maybe you guys have had to repeat to me what councillors already know, but I think we should take some comfort from what you've just explained. That gives us a better chance as I said of meeting these project now program approaches, minimises the risk. Members, any other questions? I wonder, any other questions for Anne and the assembled team at this stage? Again, early in the year, but well done. It's giving a sense of confidence that we've got a program that is achievable, which is really superb. Can I move to the resolution, please, which is that we receive Anne's report, probably done the hard yards by Kate, but we'll thank Anne in her absence. I'm going to move over. Seconder, please, looking down the line. Can somebody, thank you, Don. Don's there. Yes, thank you. So I'll put the motion in, please, that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Right, I'd like to make a suggestion, Fee. We are at 25 past, so these folk need to get their cup of tea or take a short break. So I will adjourn the the finance and assurance meeting effectively now, close enough to 10:30, and we will reconvene once you folk have had a chance to deal with your council meeting and your letter to Minister Mahuta. So I'm going to vacate the chair and let somebody else take over.
Thanks, Chair. I see we're waiting for a couple more councillors, but good morning, everybody. Just Fiona, have you heard any apologies from anybody? I just see Councillor Harper's not on board.
I've texted.
Okay. I can't quite see everybody, but how many councillors we got enough for them?
Mr. Mayor.
Needs to turn a speaker down on there somewhere.
Mr. Mayor, he'll be an apology by the look of the reply to a text message I got from him.
Okay. We do have a quorum, so I think we can reconvene the council meeting and talk to item 7. Talk to item 7.
Started the council meeting, Councillor Menzies.
You tell me when it's good to go, please, Fiona. How are we looking, Fiona?
5 seconds, please, Mr. Mayor.
No worries. So do you want to go through some formalities for a apologies part then, Fiona?
Yep, just an apology for Councillor Harper.
Okay. Thanks.
Right.
Good to go?
Yep.
Okay, we'll start again. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this reconvened meeting, council meeting, where we're going to discuss the item 7.1 on Three Waters. Before we do that, I understand there's an apology from Councillor Harper. I'm happy to move that apology. Is there a seconder? Councillor, sorry, you've got that, Fiona.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. All those in favour? Against?
All right.
Great. Thank you. So that's the only formalities of the meeting today. So yeah, so we're reconvening to discuss the letter that is going to be going to Minister Mahuta and her officials in regards to the Three Waters reform and our feelings and comments, opinions on this. And it is a very important part of this entire matter. And it is what is most important is that council understands all the information that is available, and we're looking forward to future information, obviously, before we go out to our communities as required under Section 133 of the Local Government Act. If that gets to that stage, we do not know what what's going to happen through Minister Mahuta's office. But before we start, I'd just like to make a big thank you, not only to councillors, but to Matt and to Cameron and the team for the work that's gone on with this. The letter that has been put together, in my view, fairly summarises everything that we need to ask, and it aligns with other matters that have been raised around the country. Mr. Russell, do you want to speak to this matter any further? You might have to unmute. Or Mr. Mackey.
Look, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I think we covered what we needed to cover in the original meeting, and I hope that the feedback as consolidated into the letter for the minister captures the sentiment and the messaging that council would like to convey to central government on the matter, and the clarifications that this council would like to seek. Just wanted to reiterate my thanks to council for their contribution to the production of this feedback. I understand that based on feedback that I've had from other sources, this is a really comprehensive consolidation of feedback for the minister. So I think that reflects really well on this council and the degree of engagement and thinking around the reform. So from myself, thank you for your assistance with that.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Okay, I don't see Mr. McIntosh wanting to speak to the matter. So you have had this document for some time, and I know there have been some suggestions for amendment. So we now have the resolutions in front of us, the recommendations, through to the new L. Are there any comments or questions around this matter before I put it through to N? Sorry. There don't seem to be any comments or questions. So if we've got a councillor who can move this recommendation, Councillor Kramer, seconder. I can't see anyone in chambers.
Yes, I'm prepared to second.
Councillor Douglas. So that's been moved by Councillor Kramer and seconded by Councillor Douglas. Before I put it, make sure there's no other comments or questions. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So that was moved. Councillor Kramer seconded. Councillor Douglas. Fiona. Oh, Councillor Fraser, have you got your hand up?
Sorry, that went up. Automatically picked up my hand raising when I was just going yes.
That's
so
good, because the motion's been moved and seconded and carried, so I wouldn't have been able to take a question. I'm sorry. Okay, so once again, I'd like to reiterate a big thank you to everyone that's been involved in this. I know that the minister has given a deadline for the end of this month, and we're well within that to get this document to the minister. Just for your information, it will be shared with, this document will be shared with the Otago Southland part of this process as well, because they want to put all of the letters in one place so that we can all refer to each other's letters going forward. I don't know if you're aware of that, Mr. Russell and Mr. McIntosh had just come through over the weekend from Mayor Cadogan and Clutha. So they want to put everything in a file so that if anyone needs to refer to other people's information, they can. All right. So that being that, Fiona, I can close the council meeting.
Councillor Ruddenclaw indicated she wanted to speak, and so did Councillor Owen.
Oh no! During the process, sorry. Oh, after. Okay. Councillor Ruddenclaw and then Councillor Owen.
Sorry, through you, Your Worship. The letters from the Otago Southland, will we have availability to read them as well, Your Worship? Yes,
they're all going to go into one place, yet to be found, and that will be available to the public as well, I understand. Okay. So once that's been finalised, I'll get it to you. Councillor Owen, sorry, I can't see you there, Karen.
Yeah, just wondering if that letter could be made available to the wider public as well, just because the questions and the emails keep coming from the public, and I'd like them to be able to see what our feedback to government was. So, yeah.
Absolutely, it's an open letter to the public. It's been discussed through the previous council meeting and today for the information of the public. It's not something we've got any information we've got to hide. It is their information for their assets. So that will be shared. It's been ticked. The box has been ticked now. It's available as of now. We will get that out there, and I don't know if Louise or any of the comms team are on board, but we can get that on the website and Facebook pretty quickly
Through you, Your Worship. Absolutely, Councillor Owen, that's been the discussion internally as the intent as soon as the letter is finalised with council that there would be a proactive release of the feedback that Southland District Council had provided to the Minister on behalf of its communities. So we will be getting that underway in the coming days.
Thank you. And we've got a thumbs up from Fran there too. All right, thank you again, everybody. And we'll let Mr. Robertson continue with his meeting. And thanks for coming on board for a very important part of the process. Let's see, now we wait and see what happens. Thanks for that, Fiona. We're having
Just
smoking.
having a few minutes break before we start finance again.
Okay, cool.
Where does it go?
Should go to here.
Yeah, well, we'd have to check it out, won't we?
Yeah.
Somebody can hear us.
Yep.
Are we alone?
Don't tell anybody.
I can't even join you. I've been disabled. Fiona's disabled me.
I thought you'd do it sooner than now.
Cut you off at the knees, has she?
Yeah, about time.
It's far more effective than just kicking you under the table, Gary.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, and probably Bruce is okay right now because she's actually sitting around the side.
I'll just remind you we are still live streaming.
No, it's disabled me.
Disabled what? Your video?
Matt's saying we're live streaming, but are we?
No, it's all on pause.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's no record up the top, so.
Sorry, guys. I just reminded
Everything is paused.
still live streaming.
Shelley's in a hallway.
I hope my video's on now. Look at that. Thanks, Fiona.
Wasn't me.
Oh, not?
No.
You have the power, Gary.
Whoever the host has disabled me. It's all good.
That'll be Anne.
I wish I did have that much power, Abel. Whoop, Shelley's gone into just her face highlighted. Whoop, she's back.
That's Stu Cordell's getting his name out there, Abel, with Tiana.
Sorry, what was that?
Stu Cordell's getting his name out there with Tiana.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, it's it's been an interesting little campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a lot of airtime. Yeah. He seems a real nice guy. I've met him a couple of times, so
right.
Seems a reasonable sort of rooster. So yeah, it's quite good. Yeah, certainly take a long smoker break when we're not there.
It's a fact.
I gave them all the leftover sweets and fruit and things from when we were on Saturday, so they're probably helping.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were quite excited about lollies on the table.
Oh, dear. Went up to Garston yesterday, Saturday, Rob, and geez, the roads were quiet.
Yeah, it was they're a bit busier last weekend, but yeah, there wasn't too much traffic this weekend.
No, and yesterday sitting at Garston, normally we hear it, just nothing, just nothing. Incredible.
Well, I travelled up to the West Coast the other day from Hawea to
You've muted, Abel.
I've done it on purpose. So zip it, everyone. Apparently this has been going out to the outside fucking world.
Can you hear me now, Abel?
Yeah, I can, but yes, I can. Can you hear me? There we go.
Michael, we're back.
Am I host?
Yeah, that should be working now.
Right. Can you hear me, Abel, this time?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear, Bruce.
Well, you can't see me, but that won't be the end of the world. When I went to the instructions, it said, do you want to be touched? Do you want your image touched up? And I thought that would be yes, but it's apparently going to take a long time. So I won't. You'll have to put up with me faceless, I think, at this stage. As long as folk can hear me. Gary, you can hear me. Rob, you can hear me. I can see your pictures. Great. Okay. Well, look, I think for the sake of the meeting, we need to keep moving. I apologise for the delay. That was my fault or my problem. I had to take a call. Look, just want to note, Christine, you sort of got on there early just as we were about to adjourn. So, welcome. Was the recording start? Sorry. Recording now in progress. Christine, welcome. And just we're getting feedback. Sorry. What are you doing over there?
I'm doing nothing. Right, start again.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me again, Abel?
Yes, clear as a bell.
Great, that's good. Right, I was just trying to welcome Christine. There's something about the meeting where I can't welcome you, Christine, to the meeting. So it's great. It's great to have you here. Thank you for your hard yards already this morning, and it's been aided by some very good staff input. So I do appreciate the staff and their papers, which is really superb. By my calculations, we are up to item 7.7, which is the finance transactional update. And if I can just have a page, please, Fee. It is 143 in your agenda pack, please. So, Shelley, is it that we are going to have on this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This report just provides a summary of Council's transactional activities up to the 30th of June 21 and gives you a summary of our debt management for the year. You can see on the first table, the balance of our revenue stream is looking quite good compared to last year, except for sundry debtors, and that was mainly because we had a $1.1 million invoice just go out at the end of June. So rates has had a really good year. We've been following through with our instalments, doing a letter out for penalties and chasing those up, and working really closely this year with our mortgage demand holders and progressing a little bit more through with the debt collection process as well this year. We tried to do a promotion on rates rebates this year. We got out to half a dozen locations within the district. We went to a couple of groups and spoke at them. This was really well received by the public, seeing us out and about and promoting it. Unfortunately, the numbers didn't quite reflect that, but it was definitely something well worthwhile. I just want to note I've got a mistake on the emailing rates. Westpac actually provide us with a $300 voucher this year, and that promotion is for people going on email and direct debits every year. Again, great response this year, and we've just done our prize prize winner, and we'll get in contact with them shortly, just with the delay in the due dates for rates due to COVID this year. Our metered water rates this year has all been realigned with rates, same due date, same 10% instalment penalties, and this was the first year we did the 10% on the overall amount outstanding. We did a letter out with this and really had no correspondence or comments around it. So we will progress that sort of debt on in the same way as rates goes as well. CASA, again, the policy that we've interpreted of 60 days for potential disconnection, those letters have a fantastic response and we've had no issues with CASA at all this year. Everyone is paying up nicely and it progresses really, really well. Sundry Debt, something we didn't quite get on top of this year as I would have liked to have. We did a lot of work on our credit balances and our suspense accounts and following that sort of stuff up. So that's first on our list this year to really get our teeth into and start working on that. Because as you'll know in the report this year, we had our debt collection officer and also our debtors officer resign during the year. This was a real loss of knowledge and people in our small team. Although this was sort of a low point of the year, this was a real highlight for me. In our team, we've adjusted from roles to like shared tasks, and we're all called finance officers and all share. We created manuals that were task orientated, and this year just filled the void when anyone could pick it up, learn what to do, and there was a pro map in behind it. These manuals have proven to be an absolute lifesaver. They are a work in progress, and we've also shared them with some other teams around council just to show what we've done in our team to mitigate that loss when a staff member perhaps goes. So we're not losing all that knowledge, and they get updated regularly as the staff change over. This year we started working with IT and trying to get our debt management procedures inside our current pathway system. We just started that just before June and it was going well. Letters were getting produced out of the system and the hope that we're going to work through our reporting and include our debtors in on that. This year in April, the government passed significant legislation relating to Maori-owned land to support its use and development. So we did a review of all the Maori land within council as a result of the legislative changes, and this showed up that we had 6 properties that have now become non-rateable, and we've written off the rates at a tune of 29,000. So that's all up to date. This year we've also launched an online portal for the internal staff to be able to do their debtors requests. This helps mitigate any typing errors we can upload into the system. It just makes it better for all parties involved. The solicitors portal we ran out last year, again, reduced our workload significantly. It's gone really well with minimal feedback on that. We are going to keep working with our solicitors. We noticed we got a lot of refunds on our direct debits. As much as you save work, it sometimes creates work in another place. So we'll continue to work together with that. So another busy year, working really well, and got a few projects on the list for this year to help maintain what we're doing and do better. Any questions?
Brilliant. Thank you very much for a great summary of a very good report. Do I have questions from members they'd like to raise at this stage? Look at that, Shelley. It's so clear. On a note, no, we've got John and then we've got Julie. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. So just the remission of rates for the Maori land, is this something that is brand new and we haven't done it before? Because I believe that we had done it before. Is this just including parcels of land that have been omitted, or what is the reason for these addition of these new properties?
So with the legislation changes that came through, there was a few more aspects that made more land become non-rateable. So if it was unused land or it had individual homes on Maori freehold land, so there's about half a dozen criterias. So we do have a rates remission policy as well that picks up some other stuff, but this was as per the legislative changes that came through from government.
So does this land have houses on it, or is this specifically house excluded land?
The 6 properties we had no houses on it. It was unused land.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shelley, for a very good report and great work with your team there. It's very good to see or hear. A question around the whenua Maori land, the arrears that were written off there, was it outstanding? Have we written them off in the past, or is that just 1 year's? They have been paying rates in the past, or was that arrears from built up from some time ago?
Some of the properties had been, but it was mainly the current years in the 2021 year and from the arrears the year before.
Thank you.
This isn't a large Maori land rate problem, by the way. I should be careful how I say that, but in terms of classification of land rates, this is not a significant issue, by the way. If you go further north into the North Island, you will find this is in the number of millions of dollars, and it was an intractable problem where councils were building massive debtors over rates which were in the long run uncollectible. I mean, the short of it is that actually councils have to allow for this in their budgeting. But the reality of it was the minister determined, I think reasonably, that actually the reality of the situation needed to be dealt to, and this is what's happened. The fact that this is the level of arrears write-off that we face as a council makes it a very small problem compared to other councils elsewhere. Right, I think it's Gary and then it's Rob.
Thank you. Not a question, just a comment around losing that intellectual knowledge is a shame. We had, as you say, 2 staff members leave, but I do have to ask the question, why wasn't it ProMat before? I thought ProMat had been in for 5 years, 5 or 6 years. But anyway, lessons learned, and pleased with what's happening there now, and it sounds like you guys and girls are as well. So good stuff.
Yes, thank you, Gary. ProMap has been in for a long time, and it's something we've used exceptionally well as a team. But our manuals actually just link them all together. Having something in a system and not knowing where it was or where it fitted into a role didn't really help. So the manual just brought it all together and highlighted from like daily or monthly tasks to yearly things that only happen once a year, because it may be in a ProMap, but you don't know it's got to be done unless you know about it. So it just tied it all together really nicely, and ProMap's a fantastic system.
I appreciate that, Shelley, because we can't afford to have even lights of the water meter rates not being paid. So thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just back to page 147 and 21, just back to that, what we were talking about before. It's got in there the new legislation provides the ability to. So does that mean that people need to apply for it, or is it just getting done by default, just for my clarification?
And non-rateable land is by default. So each year it's set up, and once it's set up, non-rateable will be going forward.
So people don't actually have to apply to it. It's something that the council's actually looked at overall and just basically written it off.
Yes, followed the legislation and now made it non-rateable going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you there, Rob. Right, if no other questions, can I move to the recommendation? Shelley, again, thank you for your report. And I hear Gary's, bit about where was ProMat for across the place, but I suspect you've got a lesson that will be great to be able to share with your colleagues elsewhere in the organisation. So congratulations for finding a very astute and actually probably long needed solution around the loss of 2 staff. So congratulations on that. So I'll move from the chair that we receive Shelley's report. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks, Shelley. Great to have your input, please. Right, we have a couple of items. The first one is a very brief report on the audit of the long-term report. I think we just got Jason. We haven't got our auditor with us. I think it was deemed that we didn't need to, given the shortness of the report. So, Jason, if you could give us a sense of what Derek has said to us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair, and tēnā koutou committee members. Apologies, I can't access my video at the moment for some reason, but I will be just communicating through the audio. I guess in terms of this report, yes, as the Chair outlined, this is the final formality really in terms of the LTP audit process. There are effectively 3 matters identified in the report, and none of those are new following receipt of the audit opinion prior to adoption of the LTP in June earlier this year. Up and running. So on that basis, yeah, I didn't really feel like there's much Dirk could potentially add on this. The first matter really was the general matter regarding the Waka Kotahi funding announcement and the amended approach, which we went through late in the LTP process. And that was just, as I said, a general matter, not an emphasis matter like the other 2 raised in that management report. The first emphasis of matter again was around the 3 waters reforms and the uncertainty over that, which was highlighted back when Audit was here looking at the consultation document for the LTP. And the second one is regarding the capital expenditure program, which has had a bit of discussion this morning, and the ability for us to deliver that year upon year over our long-term plan program. Outside of those 3 matters, a pretty standard report, which I think hopefully speaks to the thorough process and relationship we had with Audit throughout the I guess the final stages of the long-term plan. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions, comments from the committee, and I'll hand over to the chair.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Do we have any questions for Jason really about the long-term plan at this stage that people would like to raise? I'll lead off the batting, Jason. I just wanted to return to the Waka Kotahi issue, vexatious though that was for us. Have we learned anything from this? Is there anything that that you would recommend we do differently with the next LTP? A lesson, in other words, is there some form of lesson that we've learned that we need to capture now?
I think internally, probably not actually. I think it's probably confirmed by the recent announcement from Waka Kotahi that then resulted in further funding being available to many councils. I don't think we were the only one who received additional funding afterwards. I think possibly the fact that it was oversubscribed again, I can only provide my opinion here, is that that forced sort of, I guess, a change in the normal process for Waka Kotahi going through. They had to make some calls around that, and then as a result, we saw funding across the board reduced, and only then to see additional funding post adoption of our long-term plan, which again provides some minor challenges again for council going forward. I think communication, still having a good open relationship with Waka Kotahi through that process. There are options available to council around whether we want to, I know some other councils have taken a percentage, allowing through their LTP for a percentage of that funding, but internal discussions we've tried to be thorough and really work through the work program for our roading network and what needs to be achieved, and that's been the process. I'm not sure Mr. Russell may want to provide some comment around that, but it's, I guess, my personal view on that.
Matt, you may have a view later, but I just wondered if we could take some other comments or questions from the committee first, because I suspect it could be on the same stuff. Gary and then Julie.
Yeah, just not a question, but you did ask a question, what could be done better? We've talked about this in the past, that the relationship with Waka Kotahi is very good with Southland, but what could be done better is that we could align the long-term plans. This is something that's been discussed for as long as I've been mayor. It would be great to have that alignment between their long-term visions and our long-term visions, so that we don't have this situation arising again. That's the only comment I've got on that one.
Thanks, Gary. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. Just a question from on the document on page 156, and the auditor saying there that they will seek recovery of fees relation to the additional work performed over Waka Kotahi funding. Is that us, or is that going back to Wakakatahi?
That's from us, I would say. Anne, you want to disabuse me of my my views on that? But I think I read that as being us. No?
I probably did too. I probably did too, but I just wanted to make the point.
Sticks in your drawer. I suspect, Julie. Yeah, I wondered about that. In fairness to the auditor, it did require more work, unfortunately. And that reflects the risks around, I think the point that you've made, Gary, that the non-alignment is an issue. Look, for what it's worth, Gary, I'm sure you have made representations through friendship, and I stress this. I know that this issue, and reflecting on the Southland one, has been spoken of at pretty senior levels within Wakakatahi, because I had the chance to raise the alignment issues, not just for Southland, but across the sector. Whether that means anything, I have no idea. It's just me saying into the system, look, this really is a challenge which we did not need to face. But unfortunately, Julie, we will pay for it. Are there any other questions people would like to raise on this? Matt, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this at this stage?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, just really to reiterate Jason's comments, but also to add that this challenging relationship with Wakakatahi moving forward is going to need to really carefully be managed. In particular, it puts the onus on us to ensure that our asset management framework and accuracy is spot on. We need to ensure that we're really proactively engaging with Wakakatahi around our critical issues, given that we see that there are funding challenges now, and there's likely to be funding challenges moving forward. The importance of having robust data that backs up that engagement with Wakakatahi is really critical. I think we need to keep the pressure on in terms of how we engage at both the staff level and the governance level. As Mayor Gary indicated, alignment with our LTP cycles would make a huge difference for us in terms of the ease of maintaining our budgeting and asset management process. As we've seen through this last LTP process, it was a bit of a shambles, having to adjust all of our budgets as we were looking to sign off the LTP, and now we're reversing those again to an extent with the reintroduction of some additional budgeting. It's work that we just shouldn't have to be doing and choose up valuable resource.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Bruce, you're on mute. Can't hear you.
That was a bit of unknown censorship on me there, Abel. Probably needed. Look, I think that there's been probably from around the sector now appropriate stuff, but actually it's interesting, Matt. I just wanted to reflect our understanding and our relationships are a key mitigation, and I go back to the fact that under our early paper, Strategic Risks, we had a short discussion that actually our relationships are still for us strategically very important and high. So perhaps the learning is there ways in which we can keep it going, and I think you've given us the answer, Matt. So I presume that's something going forward that actually we need to integrate into our thinking, planning and engagement with Wakakatahi. Christine, you've got a point.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add that's also a relationship with our community, because on the LTP we're going out talking about this, so it comes back to a credibility issue in addition to that.
I don't know whether everybody was able to hear that, sorry, but Christine made the point. It also goes back, from a risk perspective, goes back to our community, because obviously we have essentially a proposition in the long-term plan, which was in some sense cut out from underneath us at the last moment to then, and Matt said it be almost reinserted, which creates issues. Again, Christine, earlier this morning we talked about a trust deficit at the local level, about our decision making. So I think your point reflects back into this. So if there is a message out of the committee, it comes back into making use of that strategic risk framework, and actually, Cameron, I guess how ELT works that forward, including actually your point, Matt, that actually it's also at politician to politician level. It's not just official to official level. I appreciate that. Okay, if there's no other questions, can I move us then please to the resolution, which is that we receive Derek's report. I'm going to move that. Oh, sorry, Jason's report, sorry, which includes Derek's management report letter. I'm going to move that. Do I have a second to please? Somebody? Thank you, Don. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much, Jason. Appreciate that. Engagement letter. This is looks
Jason,
like
Jason, just Jason's information. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll be in the office tomorrow morning. If you needed that signed, I'll be in the office tomorrow morning.
Thanks.
We go to the limited independent assurance report on the Dementia Trustee. Always a piece of minor work. Obviously, we didn't have this previously. Bree or Anne or somebody, would you want to very quickly take us through? Cherie's tagged for this, right?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm going to present this report for Cherie. So I'm presenting the engagement letter for the limited independent insurance report of the Dementia Trustee for the year end 30 June 2021. I will take this report as read, however, I'll just note the following points. That this report provides an overview of and seeks authorisation of Audit New Zealand's engagement letter, and that Audit New Zealand require a separate engagement letter for the limited independence insurance report compared to the engagement letter for the annual report. I will just note the following key points, that the timetable for this work is that it will be completed concurrently with Council's statutory annual report and will occur at the same time. And Audit New Zealand require the Mayor and representation from Covenant Trustee Services Limited as trustee to sign this letter to confirm their acceptance of the terms of the engagement letter. And you'll note in attachment A that Ignore Waina has already signed this letter on behalf of Covenant Trustees Limited. And I'll take any questions if you may have them.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, any questions in relationship to this engagement from Audit New Zealand? Believe it or not, they have been doing it before, and it's a reasonably standard thing. The reason it needs to be separate is actually it's not the same level of assurance we have over our annual report. As you quite rightly indicated, this is negative assurance, and they look at one particular point within the trustee, which is the need to disclose the stockholders for our debt, which is the local government finance agency, and in effect that we are up to date in what is that state at balance date. But they do it by what is called negative assurance, which is simply saying that in the course of the audit, nothing's come to their attention that would suggest that what we disclose in our compliance report is wrong. It's not positive assurance. It's as simple as that. It's a minor piece of work, but needed. And as you can see with a trustee, there is a trustee on the other side in the form of Covenant. You're right, it's a Covenant Trustee Services, whatever they call themselves, who have an obligation to the stockholders to observe that we comply with the trustee. So it's a reasonably straightforward piece of work, but it is one which is part of our external accountability, and arguably the stockholder, particularly in the form of our GFA, treats seriously. If there's no other questions on this, I'd like to move to the recommendations, please. And it is important to look at two of them, particularly one is that we receive a report. Thank you very much. The second, after we have determined that we've met the decision-making process of the Act, is that we ask Gary to actually sign the engagement letter for the what they call limited independent assurance report, as I've tried to capture pretty quickly and as well explained inside the report. I'm going to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, can we move to 7.10? And I think, Nick, is it you? It's health and safety, please.
Terry will actually read to the report, so we're just waiting for Terry to join us.
Oh, right, okay, that's brilliant. Far away. Brilliant, Terry. If we could, without rushing you, be very keen to hear what you've got to say, please.
Unmute yourself, Terry.
Sorry, team. I'm just here to answer any questions on the health and safety update.
Right, thank you, Terry. It's a reasonably straightforward report. Believe it or not, I've got 6 questions, but before I ask mine, can I open them up, please, to members of the committee? The questions you've got on for Terry on her report, please. Okay, you can hear my 6. Can I just check, please? When you go to the table, I need to just find my table, sorry. It says here, very good table. When I look at the left-hand column, I go to the bottom box that says risk state. So we've got 34 log risks. We've investigated, we've minimised, we've reviewed, but we've eliminated none. Is that a good number or not? I want to interpret it. Should I be seeing risks being eliminated?
From time to time, there are risks that can be eliminated through engineering or substitution.
Okay, so let me just check. We better make certain for the benefit of committee members. What are these risks? So these are the hazards we've identified, and they're going to, like such as lone workers, driving, all these sorts of things. These are the core risks, which quite frankly are with us as long as we operate. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Brilliant. Can you just help me then with e-learning? This is the top right-hand box, where it looks like we've got pretty good compliance. Just again, a snapshot. What is HSO1 through 8? I presume there are different layers or levels of learning and understanding around health and safety. Is that right?
That's correct. There are different components of our health and safety framework. So HSO1 through to 8 include emergency training, your health and well-being, managing risk, reporting, health and safety events, training, setting objectives. So they all represent different components of our health and safety framework.
So what would 8 be?
So 8 is in an emergency, which is all about what to do in the event of emergency in any of our buildings or sites.
Right. Okay. Look, I think there's probably pretty high compliance here. Given I think probably just note that that's relatively low, and we need to think about what actually is not covered by a higher rate of learning. And if it's not knowing what to do in the case of emergency, that would be interesting. So I'll leave you folk to reflect on that, which is super fine. Can I just also then go to the box below? I'm always concerned about contractors, the idea of combined PCBUs, and I also accept that COVID's probably affected our monitoring. I presume we do intend, though, on trying to raise our level of monitoring of contractors.
Yes, absolutely. And at the moment, we're reviewing our organisational health and safety KPIs. Contractor monitoring will be one of those. So we're looking to see that increase.
Yeah. So then my next question is, sorry, but this probably feels like an exam. Perhaps it is really. Can I just go to the near misses, which again is on the left-hand column. We've got 2 this month, 2 year to date. In terms of the terminology, our TRIFR and our LTIFR are essentially primarily lag indicators. Near misses are seen as one of the best. And I'm going to say we only have 2 near misses recorded. Does that meet your expectations?
2 near misses for the month of July. Yes, it does. It is consistent with how our measurements in July previous years. We don't have as many people out and about at that time of year either. It's sitting about average.
Okay, so that's a trend. I wonder if we have a developing, I go back to the education thing, a developing understanding around health and safety, whether in fact 2 is a good number. In other words, should it be higher? I think to the extent I understand health and safety systems, near miss reporting is something that we should be encouraging on the basis that it gives us a better sense of what's the nature of the hazardscape that we're trying to deal with. So perhaps just a warning, I will be looking at this number because I think it does reflect the fact that actually we should be seeing a higher level of reporting across the place. Now, I appreciate winter, everything else under the sun, COVID, but I do think that actually somewhere down the track, that number is probably too low. So it's a question of do we have effective understanding, and are we supportive of people that report near misses? But I'll leave that as a generalised statement. In the paper, we note that there is a roadmap. Check, have we seen that roadmap? Probably my ignorance, because I probably have read it, but I don't know. Has the committee actually seen that roadmap?
Yes, it's been approved by.
It would be, and I think this reflects my final point around us as elected officials being aware of due diligence. Fulfilling our due diligence obligations. And for my members, read section 44 of the Act if there's one part of the Act that you need to read, which is simply understanding the system. So well done on the fact that we've got a roadmap in place. I wonder if in future reports there's a sense to which we could get a timeline and achievement against that timeline of the key points of the roadmap.
Absolutely.
I think that would be really important for us. Appreciate the fact that I should have checked my minutes to know that actually I had seen it. But members, I think this is really important that actually we have signed off a really important piece of work, which is about improving the system, which after all is one of the key areas that we, and Cameron, you liability-wise, hold a pretty strong interest in. The other thing, Terry, and it's really a 7th question, is that elected members have a responsibility to verify what is in place. Now we can get that partly through reporting. Have we got other steps in place to help members understand and verify that our health and safety systems are in place and working?
We're just working through a new assurance plan with our risk support currently, which will enable us to support that assurance.
Brilliant. That'll be great. Again, I'm wanting to reflect here the needs not only of the organisation as a whole, but also the need for elected members. And it's actually more than, of course, just the risk committee. It's actually the entire council. Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So that's my questions. You've done well. Yeah. Somebody down there is going to speak. I think it's either Nick or Matt.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just to talk to some of what Terry touched on, and we'll report on this next month. The STC has made good progress in regards to its roadmap. Obviously, we held the governance workshop. Last month, we secured an additional resource who's now joined us and doing a great job there. There's been a lot of work that's been done in regards to the community halls, with all the FENS paperwork now sitting with FENS himself. The next step for that is site-specific safety plans for all of those community facilities as well. And we have sitting on our table from last week the draft hazard risk management standard that's been developed and will be rolled out over the next 12 to 18 months.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. I didn't doubt that there was any being sitting on our hands, but I think it's important that we get a level of that optics here at the risk committee. Otherwise, difficult for us to know. And I might be saying silly things like I don't think near misses is the right number. So I just want to reflect on that. Any other questions for our members? Oh, sorry, Nick.
Through you again, Mr. Chair. Yeah, look, 2 is pretty light. It's again an area that we would want to see some increase in, as well as our observations, and a piece of work that we need to continue pushing out through our teams to use that as our lead, indicator as you talk on.
Appreciate that, and it's also why I'm reasonably hot on the contractor monitoring as well, because quite frankly, some of the more and heavier issues that we could face from a health and safety perspective, and I don't want to dismiss, librarians stretching backs and bits and pieces, but some of the higher risk stuff occurs with our contractors, which is our responsibility as much as anything else. So I appreciate that, Nick, and thank you, Terry. It's again benefit of a clear report, and you're able to actually ask some good questions if you wish to. Now, councillors, are there any other questions that you have in mind after poor old Terry's put up with me? Yes, Paul.
On those, I'm just wondering if, given it the early stage of the year, if perhaps there was some contractor near misses that hadn't come through to the council yet.
We can check on that. I think we've perhaps, if I can say through my questions, Paul, put out a little query if we got the right number. My question actually isn't that 2 isn't the right number. My question is actually that we should be looking for an increase generally in near miss reporting, but I'm sure as we get the next report that will be and can be checked. So thanks for that question, Paul. Rightio. Can I then move to the motion, please? And I've got no other questions. Can I just check here, please, Fia? I want to do something that's a wee bit naughty of me, which is add a D.
Yes, you can do that.
So I'd like to suggest that we receive Terry's good report. Thank you, Terry and Nick, and we agree with this. Can I suggest this is a paper that actually all councillors should see?
Every councillor gets a copy of the finance and assurance
Okay,
agenda.
right.
If they're not a member of the committee, it's up to them whether they read it.
Well, I'm not comfortable with that being sufficient.
Okay.
Just as with the risk management, we sent this to council for the risks considered a significant issue. This is actually one of our key risk areas, and I would like all councillors to be aware of this. Yes, Nick.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the other avenue for this report to go through would be services and assets, given its link to the large capital expenditure and contractor risk. So definitely the likes of the dashboard could easily go or form part of the services and asset report, which is full council.
Look, I'm reasonably, I think my critical thing is that I believe all councillors, like our risk work, need to be aware of health and safety as a whole. They will be assuming that we're dealing with it, and hopefully we are. But I think they need to see the report. So look, I'm quite open. I don't want to force a motion unless we don't have to have it, but I'm just really reflecting as chair. There are other people that need to see the fullness of this report and what we have coming through in the future. What's the best way? Well, we'll leave it. You've heard my views, and I'll let it for you folk to see it through.
A couple of avenues.
Yeah.
It could be picked up in your council report, your management report, or it could be that once it's been seen by the Finance and Assurance Committee, then follows to the next council meeting.
I'll let you. Can I let you guys talk about that internally? I doubt that actually. And I'm perhaps from a 7 race as a point before. Can I ask you guys just to reflect on that? That I think this is a risk area for us, along with our strategic risks. This is something which our councillors as a whole should see. Yes, Christine.
I just want to support your recommendation.
Yeah.
I don't think I can discharge my duties adequately if I don't see the report instead of have to remind myself to go into
Yes.
this committee meeting.
Agreed.
And that's one of the reasons I attend this meeting, in order to access that information.
Thank you, Christine. So there we go. If I can just add that as a bit. So we'll stick with the original motion which we receive, and that we have complied with the Act, but staff, I could leave it with you to work through what is the best way that this can be drawn specifically to the attention of all councillors, whether it's through the committee or whether it's direct to council. I'll leave in your hands. I'm happy to put that motion. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul. In that case, those in favour, please raise their hands, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much for that. Right, we're into public excluded. If I could move us then to